Hi guys, my name is Will. I'm the co-founder of Northflank and CEO. Thank you for coming to my workshop. Today we will be deploying some resources to Kubernetes on Civo Kubernetes through the Northflank platform. We will be deploying a web application with a Redis database onto Kubernetes. Are we okay on the audio? There we go. Wonderful. That didn't make the start any easier. So very nice to have you all here today. I'll start with a short presentation. From code to cloud, streamline DevOps workflows. A short introduction on what we're building at Northflank. We're building a self-service developer platform that can enable engineering teams and platform engineering teams alike deliver their microservices and databases to Kubernetes, either through a UI, CLI, API, or GitOps workflows. We support any cloud provider that can deploy to Kubernetes. In this particular workshop, we'll be deploying to Civo's Kubernetes platform, yeah, we have 20,000 engineers deploying to our platform in production today. Very happy to do this workshop with you. Everyone and platform engineering teams like to talk about a golden path to production, where engineers can self-service and push to version control, create preview environments. When they're happy with their preview, they move to a UAT or pre-prod staging environment, and then merge their pre-prod environment to production in a seamless workflow. And that's what we'll be setting up today. So first we will clone a couple of Git repositories, one a GitOps repository, one application repository. Then we will set up a Kubernetes cluster on Civo with Northflank's cluster lifecycle management. And then we will go ahead and create a production environment to deploy our web application, connecting to a Redis database using GitOps. We will then create a preview environment using infrastructure as code with a pull request. We'll then merge the pull request and then see continuous integration, deployment, and delivery all working in conjunction together. So we may as well get started. I've tried to put this link in as large font as possible so you can follow the steps on GitHub step by step. So I'm going to open this URL, but it's northflank-civo /gitops-northflank. And if anyone can't find that URL, let us know. So initially, if people are following on with their laptops, we'll need to create two accounts. One is a Northflank account, which you can sign up for free. And then a Civo account, which you can use one of their seminar sign-up links as seen in the Git list to help you create the cluster, which is also does not require a payment method and is free for the workshop. So I'm going to head over now to the Northflank sign-up link, app.northflank.com/sign-up. I'm going to sign up. And when you sign up, you'll have to select the developer sandbox tier rather than pay as you go. And that will give you a number of free services and databases on the Northflank platform with our multi-tenant platform. But of course, we'll be deploying to a Civo cluster, so there will be no restriction on the number of resources you deploy there. I've now created my account, and I'm going to head over to the billing page, where I can redeem a code at the top right-hand corner. And I can claim this token. Actually, you can also click this link directly here, which is in the list of steps in the Git repo. I've now redeemed my code, and everything in this talk is now free. I'm going to now sign up to Civo. Brilliant. Now I have my Civo account created. I'll now be able to head over to my profile. My settings, sorry, not my profile. Oh, there we go. And click on Security tab. On the Security tab, we'll be able to generate an API key. And then this API key will be used in the Northflank platform to create the Civo cluster. And I can now copy this API token and then head back to the Northflank UI and click on clusters. Now the Civo cluster takes a couple of minutes to create, and the Northflank installing on top of the cluster takes a couple of minutes as well. So we're going to create the cluster now and then start setting up the Git repositories after that. So I can click... sorry?
I was asking how I get the code.
The code for Northflank or Civo? For Northflank. So in the Git repository, the code is this. Oh, sorry. So Northflank-Civo / GitOps dash Northflank. Have you found the code yet? Yeah, brilliant. Good. Okay.
Just by the way, if anyone has any questions or anything,
Did you
I got there. Yeah. I'm trying to follow along. Sorry, I got distracted with the word thing. So
that's no worries, no worries. So you can sign up to Northflank here.
yeah.
And then when you've signed up, you can go to the billing page and claim that token. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Are you? Oh, you're storming ahead.
I'm guessing the region doesn't matter.
No, the region doesn't matter. Exactly.
No. Yeah.
Brilliant. Cool. So I'm going to start creating the Civo cluster because that takes a couple of minutes to provision. So I can do that by navigating to the clusters page and then click Add Cluster on Civo. I'm going to generate a random name for the credentials. I'm going to head back to my security page on Civo to copy the API token, paste the API key, give it a random name. You can also name your cluster if you want. I'm going to deploy into the London region and then select Kubernetes version 1.26. I'm going to deploy a standard standard compute size, large, and I can deploy 3 nodes. You can also deploy 3 nodes in your free Civo account as well. Choose 100 gigs on the disk size and use the default availability zone. Brilliant. So that cluster creation can take a couple of minutes. So whilst that's initializing, we'll move on to cloning the Git repositories using GitHub's use from template feature. And those 2 repositories will be creating from template are available as a link in the GitOps Northflank repository we were viewing just a second ago. So I've now opened the web app with Redis repository. I can click use this template, create new repository. And I'm just going to choose a different Git organization, but for you it will just be your personal Git user. And I'm going to call this web app for workshop. Say that again, sorry? Don't fork. You can click a button use from template, which is the top right hand corner on the GitHub page. I'll just navigate back to that. So there's this big green button here, use this template, and you can click create a new repository in the drop down. And then feel free to clone to whichever repository, any Git organization or user you want. And also feel free to keep it private. So I've now created the repository. And then I need to do the same thing for the GitOps repository. Fabulous. So now I have a Civo Kubernetes cluster running. I have 2 repositories, and I'll now be able to proceed with linking GitHub with the Northflank platform, so we can set up our CI/CD from now on. And you can do that by navigating to the integration section with Git. I'm going to click link GitHub, and I'm going to install it on the organization or user that I clone the Git repositories to, which I did on the Northflank Civo account. And I'm just going to confirm my password. And now I've synced my Git repositories with the Northflank platform, so that I can now create my template for my production environment. So I'm going to click create a template for production. Select my my user. Click create template. I'm going to give it a name. Enable GitOps. This is really important because I want to pull the config from version control rather than having to provision it manually. Now I have duplicated repositories here because I had the base Git repository and the cloned one. On your side, you'll just see 2 repositories that you've created. So I will now select GitOps for workshop. I'll select the main branch and the file path northflank.json. It's the default, and it's automatically synced in all of the nodes that we will be creating. We'll start by creating Redis, and that will create a Redis stateful workload on top of Kubernetes for you. This Redis add-on is configured with the latest version of Redis that the Northflank platform supports, which is version 7. And we're configuring 0.5 vCPU, 1 gig of RAM, and 8 gig of storage with 1 replica. At a later date, you can come in here and configure Redis Sentinel to add high availability to your Redis deployment. But for now, we'll just keep it simple. Then we will create 2 builders. Northflank builders enable you to build Git repositories and Docker files and build packs. We need 2 builders, one for the preview environment and one for the production environment. Then we'll have 2 services, one to deploy the web service, and then one to run the migrations. And then we'll have a Northflank secret group, which will allow you to inherit all the connection details for Redis into your web application. So you don't have to copy and paste secrets. You'll be able to securely inject your Redis connection string into your containers. So now I will be clicking Create New Project, and then I will click Bring Your Own Cloud. So this will allow you to run this template on top of Civo. And the cluster I created earlier is now running and healthy. I can now select that, and as soon as I've done that, I'll now be able to click Create Template. And then I will click Run. And in the background, that's going to fire off the template, which will create a Redis deployment. Then it will create 2 build services and my staging services and my secrets. So at the moment, we haven't actually built any code and we haven't deployed any code. And that's what we will do in a second. But just checking, is everyone following along so far? Brilliant. Anyone got any questions so far? Nope. Okay. Brilliant. Okay, there's actually a step that we need to do now, which is to update the preview builders inside your template, because those repositories are currently pointed at our Git repositories, not the one that you created with use from template. So to edit that, you can go to the visual builder and then navigate to the prod builder, this node, and scroll down. You can then select the repository here and change it to your repository. So for me, this would be this repository. I'll click Save Node and then click on the Preview Builder and do the same thing. To the Web App for Workshop repository, click Save Node and save changes again. And I can click Run. And once again, it will run through the steps and reapply the configuration. Everything we're doing in the UI can also be driven through config as code, which I can click on the code view. This is a JSON application spec, which you can drive through version control. So if you want to change, add a new service, or change how many replicas you have running on a microservice, you can very, very easily drive the experience through version control, or move back to a visual editor. If some people in your team may prefer a UI-driven experience, you can work in combination with those workflows. Brilliant. So now we can move on to the preview and deployment of production by creating a pipeline, which we can do by heading to the project we created earlier. And you can do that at the top left-hand side of the screen. You can click a drop-down here and select the project you created. And we can see in the background that the Redis database is still provisioning on the Civo cluster, and that can take a couple of minutes. I'll now navigate to the pipelines view, create new pipeline, and you can choose whatever you name you want for the pipeline. I will now add the services we just created to the production environment, the prod web, the prod migration, and Redis. And we can see that we have no configuration currently deployed to prod web or prod migration, and the database is still provisioning. We can now deploy to production by clicking Add Release Flow and clicking on the code view. We can now copy and paste. We don't actually need to copy and paste because we're using GitOps for this particular feature. So you can navigate to the settings page, enable GitOps, select the repository, which for the purpose of this was the GitOps for Workshop repository. Main branch is selected by default, and there's a file in the repository called prod_release.json. And this essentially are the steps that when you push to the production branch will trigger a parallel and sequential workflow to build a Docker image. When the Docker image is built, it will then run a job run to run a migration against the database. When the job run has been completed, it will then release the Docker build that you've made to the microservice. And then when that's done, the release to production will have been completed. And again, this is in the same specification, the same JSON application spec. So the file is called prod_release.json, which I can navigate back to the release flow we were creating. I'll paste in the file path, prod-release.json, and I need to add a / because it's at the root. And I can see my code has now been synced into the platform. And I can head back to the Visual Builder and see all of the steps that are being configured. Brilliant. Okay, now I can run my release. So I'm going to click Save Release Flow. I'm going to run it. And in the background, this will now trigger a build on your Civo cluster. And this is using Canaco by default. We also support build kit. And this will take a couple of, hopefully under a minute. We'll see how long that takes. And then as soon as that's built, it will then be able to trigger a release to update the commit on the job and the deployment service. We'll run the job migration and then release the build to the production environment on the Civo cluster. You can also track the build logs if that's of interest. If I load the UI here, we can see that the Canaco build logs are now being streamed in, and then you'll be able to get sort of context on what's happening in your Docker build or your build pack builds. That's now built and is uploading to a remote Docker registry. Now that the Docker registry the upload has been completed, this step will complete very shortly, and it will now move on to the next step. Now the job run has been triggered, and it will run migrations to insert some default values into the Redis database. The actual application is sort of the top 10 movies on IMDb being rendered out from a Redis database. And that migration will trigger a job on the Kubernetes cluster. It will now connect securely to my Redis cluster. That's now finished and it's been completed. Therefore, the migration has been applied. and I can see that the job run spec is about to go into a healthy state. Okay, I just had to refresh. The real-time UI wasn't so real-time. And now we've seen that the job run's complete and the release has been completed. And I can see here that a deployment is taking place, and our production web site has now been updated and is running in a healthy state. And we can see that the Redis database has finished provisioning. So I can now access this domain. And we've got a Redis application and Node.js application deployed to Kubernetes using GitOps to production in under half an hour. And now we will create a preview environment to then help set up the workflow for getting new code deployed to production. And we can do that by creating a preview template. Following very similar principles that we did to create the production environment, just now we're able to template and use variables inside the configuration. So I can click Add Preview Template. And this is this configuration for the preview template you can find in the GitOps repository in the preview-env JSON file. And we can see in this configuration, it's going to create another Redis database, and it's going to have a dynamic name based on the preview PR ID. We're going to have a temporary secret group, which will inherit the connection string from Redis. And then we will create a temporary build for the preview. So as soon as the pull request is created, it will start a build and then deploy that build. So I'm going to select all of this config, head over to the preview UI, click the code view, and then paste in this preview config. And then I'm going to have to click on the settings tab to enable a Git trigger, so that when I create a pull request, it will trigger the preview. I'm going to head back to the README to show the important step here, which is to add a trigger name, which we can then reference in the code. And that trigger name is going to be called git-trigger. And then I will select the repository I want to trigger the preview on, which will be the web app repository. And we want to set a pull request trigger rule on all pull requests, so we can use a star. And that's now the trigger set up. If I head back to the visual editor, you can see the steps that will be run in sequential order. Okay, so I'm going to click Save Preview Template. And then, with any luck, I'll head over to the GitHub to the web app repository and create a pull request. I'm going to make a change to the server.mjs file in the source app server.mjs root. I've just changed the title on line 16 to a different title. I'm going to click commit change, And then here I need to click create new branch and start a pull request in the GitHub UI. Propose change. This will now create a pull request. You do actually need to click create pull request now. You do have to confirm that. And then that will have created a pull request. And then in the Northflank UI, we can see that a preview environment called changeable color has been scheduled, and it's now running through the tasks of creating Redis, creating a secret group, and then it will eventually create a Docker build. When the Docker build is finished building, it will then deploy to a temporary service, and then essentially end to end we would have created a temporary preview environment for my web application. That will take a couple of minutes to run through, and when that's complete, we'll be able to view the preview through a domain, see that everything's okay, and when that's done, we can merge our pull request and then release to production. And we'll see the workflows that we set up earlier for production, which will automatically pick up that commit, build, and deploy to production. Okay, so my add-on is now in a running state, which means it's healthy, and the service has now been created and deployed. So I will now navigate to the deployment service and click this open URL on this page. And we can see that the deployment has been made, and we can see that the new title is in the title, although the migration hasn't finished running yet. So I'll just navigate back to the preview. And we haven't created the job to run the migration. Okay. So there's the foobar in the workshop. There wouldn't be a workshop without a foobar, but yeah, we haven't got a job to run the migration against the preview environment. But essentially, as you can see here, the release has been completed, and we'll then be able to merge the pull request to the branch, which will then move this commit to production, and the new PR hello for workshop will be released to production.
I don't have that feature yet, but you could basically take a snapshot of the existing database, and as an additional step in the preview environment, fork the new database from that snapshot. So you can basically use, if you have a staging database, you could use the data for that without having to run the migration job every time. It just creates the database with that data initially. And we had a question earlier in the meantime, is if you have multiple pull requests, it will just create multiple different preview environments with distinct names with yeah, so you would basically have a distinct preview environment per pull request. Yeah, and if you push to the pull request, it will also update the commits based on the new build and everything.
Brilliant, thank you, Fred. And now I will go ahead and essentially merge the pull request, start the release to production, and we'll see that the preview environment will be shut down, and you won't be paying for any resources whilst that's in a shutdown mode. So I'll merge the pull request, confirm merge, head back to the preview UI, and we can see that the preview environment has now been deleted, and the production release flow should be triggered shortly. I forgot one of the important steps, so I can't even read my own steps. I needed to click Add Trigger down here, which would have then automatically run the release. If you remember before, we ran the release manually. So I will quickly just set up this Git trigger, add a pull request trigger on all pull requests, and merges to master. Sorry, I only want to do a branch trigger for master branch or main if you are running main, and I can add 2 rules there if you had different branches. I click Save Release Flow, and now every time I would have merged to the main branch, it would have picked up that merge. So I'll just click Run again, and that will re-trigger the release manually. And then if I had set up my Git trigger correctly, that would have been triggered when I merged the branch. And again, we'll go through the whole rigmarole of build, wait for build, upload to the registry. When the registry upload is complete, run the migration, run the deployment. Brilliant. So we have basically taken a Git repository, created a database, deployed that to Civo, created a Civo cluster, deployed to production, created a preview environment, and merged to production, all in the span of under 40 minutes. Hopefully that was somewhat engaging. If you've got any questions, please feel free to raise your hand, and I'm very happy to answer any questions afterwards as well. Yeah.
Integration test defined as part of your repository. Can you integrate that into this system and workflow so that when you create a staging environment, you could automatically run those integration tests against it?
Yeah, so the question is, can individuals run integration tests or smoke tests against one of these preview environments? So yes, but it's not a fully wonderful automated system right now. As it's quite an important thing, we find some of our users are using their GitHub Actions smoke test or Circle CI. Then when that's passed, they run their preview environments on Northflank. One of the things we want to do is add support for, in our release flows feature, is the ability to have conditional steps. So you would define your smoke tests, wait for the smoke test to complete. If they complete, continue with the release. If they've failed, abandon the release and don't continue. But that's not necessarily a first-class citizen in this experience just yet.
What you could also do is just define the tests as a job and run the job as part of the preview environment after everything else is running. You just have a condition to check that the service is deployed, and then you run that job, which makes the request for the tests.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much for the question. Any more questions?
Coupon, when does it expire?
So the coupon expires in a month and a half, I believe. So it should provide enough time. If the coupon has expired or you want to try some other services, feel free to just drop me an email at will@northflank.com, or find me online and we can sort of extend other resources if that's of use. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.